I'm at the back of the car now, and what I'm looking at is the rear spring and how it's connected and the position of the half shafts. They are right now going down towards the outside. When the weight of the body was on it, they were actually going up, and I thought I needed to get some shorter bolts for my rear spring. But now that I'm looking at it, I'm looking at these bushings that are on here, and they look like they've been compressed pretty much. And I think if I get poly bushings, that will be the way to go, and they won't compress like that in the future, and that will keep my half shafts parallel to the ground. And now what I've done is I've jacked the car up right here underneath the spring, and I've placed my jack stands in front of the rear wheels on the frame, and back of the front wheels right after the frame turns out, becomes parallel to the edge of the car. Now I'm going to take off this jack set down on the frames, or jack stands there, and I've got it nice and sturdy. It's actually not sitting on the front jack stands as yet because I have the front A-frames jacked up with the bridge jack there. So once we take off the suspension parts up there, it will rest down on those jack stands. Okay, something to be just aware of. As I was playing with the right side, you notice how the spring is now way up off of the bushing. Well, that wheel came down as I was playing with the bushing. And that spring connector nut. I'm going to try to duplicate that over here just so you're aware of, fingers could get caught. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. Fingers could get caught in there. So you got to be careful what you're doing with these things. I was trying to just get this wrench in there because I'm having trouble finding a wrench that actually will fit it, and the wheel dropped. So just be very careful when you're playing with those things. Make sure your fingers are not in the way of anything. Okay, it looks like the bottom nut on that is a 15/16, and I'm guessing the top is too, but there's no way to get a socket in there. I don't have a wrench that's actually big enough to fit the bolt. So I'm going to try to do it with an adjustable wrench. And an impact wrench on the bottom. I've got it on there after fashion, keeping my fingers clear of everything, and it slipped off on the top. is not working. I have to see if I can find a better way to get a wrench in there or something. Okay, I was able to borrow a 15/16 inch wrench, and I've got my 15/16 breaker bar. Hopefully I can get that broken loose. I did put some blaster on it and let it set. I'm going to try to let that wrench up against the it's tight. I've had that thing sitting with blaster for a couple days, so it's not giving. Okay, I'm going to try to hammer away at it a bit with the impact wrench. Now I can't even get the wrench back on there because the bolt has pushed up. That's not wanting to move even with the impact wrench. The next thing I'm going to try is putting a bar on the end of my breaker bar to give me more leverage. But before I do that, I'm going to try to loosen the bond of the rust by backing the bolt nut with a hammer and just wrapping it a little bit. Not too much to destroy the shape of the bolt, the nut. Then I won't be able to get the socket out, and I'll really be up a creek. But use the breaker bar. And over the breaker bar goes a long pipe. That'll give me more leverage. Hopefully that'll give me enough to break it loose. Boy, that's tight. So it's moving a little bit. Now what I'm going to hope to do is put a little bit of more of the blaster in there and work it both ways with the impact wrench. Number one, little blaster, and we're going to go tighten on the impact wrench so that we don't seize up the bolt. We're going to go loosen. Tighten. That's not having much of an impact on it at all, pun intended. I'm going to try again with the breaker bar and the big pipe on it for leverage. Now, this is not a good candidate for heat because this car has a fiberglass spring on it. Really wouldn't want to be putting heat that close to it. So if I can't get this off, what I see as the ultimate solution is to just take a Sawzall and have at it. So I'm getting a little bit of movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change off to a 3/4 inch ratchet with an adapter so I fit my socket on it unless I have a 15/16 in a 3/4. And then I'll be working that back and forth until I get it off. Okay, about 10 or 15 minutes of back and forth action on it with the 3/4 inch ratchet, and that's off. But the bolt will not come out because it's at an angle to the hole in the top there, and I'm going to have to take these bolts off to get it to get those big spring bolts out. So I've got to get over to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing over there. I've got a wrench wedged in. I've got my breaker bar on and my big old pipe. And try to break that loose. Whoa. I bent that wrench. It's a nice wrench that I borrowed from my son. I'll be darned. Let's see what I can do with that now. that wheel was actually pulling on that wrench and pulling it down, so that's what bent it. I've taken the wheel off to give myself some more room. We're going to try it again. Okay, and now we'll go back to the 3/4 inch ratchet and take it a little bit in each direction until we get it off. Probably take another 15-20 minutes. Going to turn this on just a bit, just to show you the kind of effort this is taking. Okay, that was tight. Now I'm loosening. Back to tighten now. Back to loosen. I've got the wrench wedged in there so that I don't have to play with it. I think that may have gotten it past the last piece of it. Yes. Okay, now that we appear to have it broken loose, the impact wrench should take it the rest of the way off. Struggle, and I'm going to walk over here and look at the clock because I actually checked what time it was when I started, and it took about 10 minutes total. This is the 15/16 inch wrench that I was using, and that's how it got bent from the force I was using against the tire. It was on the bolt and the tire was going down. It actually was on the bolt this way. The tire was going down. I had so much pressure against it, I was able to bend it. Next, we're going to address the shackle that holds the spring onto the differential. Notice there are 2 rubber pads on the top of the spring, one on the bottom. This is a 5/8 inch socket I'm using here. That one started pretty easy. There are 2 on the outside that go through these ears on the differential. Those ears are something that sometimes breaks off if you have problems. Then you have to buy a whole new cover. The bolts on the inside are blind holes into the differential cover. And those both came out pretty easy. So I'm just going to take these off, drop the spring down, and once I drop the spring down, I should be able to easily get out those spring bolts from the end. These are the two bolts that went into the blind holes on the differential. Notice that they're different lengths. I'm going to make sure that I put the long one in on the passenger side because that's where it came out. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I sure don't want to go punching a hole through that cover when I go ahead and take them out. It appears that long bolt is the same size as the bolts here that go through the ears, so I don't know that that's even an issue as far as where the other three go, but we'll double check that before we put these away so that I know. And other than the fact that there's a washer on the two that go through the ears, doesn't appear to be a difference in those bolts. This plate here, I'm sure is, if not aftermarket completely, it's been modified to have this little piece of pipe on the end of it, which apparently they have used to jack up the car using that. I don't know if they just had a pin from a floor jack or whatever so it wouldn't roll off. But it's been welded on there. I don't know if they just made a new plate or whether they just welded the pipe onto the other one. This came down easily, and now I can rotate the bolts. There is just enough room. I'm gonna have to get my dead blow hammer to tap them up through there. There's just enough room for the head of that bolt to go up through the trailing arm location there. Let's zoom this in, and I'm gonna go get my dead blow. Okay, got my trusty dead blow hammer. These are really nice because they don't mess up the threads when you tap on them, because the hammer is coated with rubber. There's the bolt. Looks to be an 8-inch bolt to me. I'll go do that to the other side, and then we'll move on to probably the shocks. Just so I know how to orient the spring, of course the arc is up at the top, the ends are below the center, in other words, but it was installed with the labels on the left side, driver's side of the car. One note about getting the bolt that holds the spring, the wrench had bent over the little tips on the hex part of the bolt, and it was preventing me from getting it up through that hole on the driver's side. So I actually had to take my cutoff wheel. Fortunately, my wheel's worn down far enough that it fit in there, and actually grind those little bumps off of it that were put on by the wrench in order to get it out. But once I did that, it tapped out with the dead blow hammer pretty easily. I'm going to assemble all these bolts onto the spring so that I know where they came from, and then we're going to address the shocks. Another thing with the spring and how it was installed, this is all that was in the pocket up there in the trailing arm. There was no rubber pad in it at all. I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to be or not, but we'll find out when we order the new bushings for the bolts.